My name is Eva Bredsdorff. I'm the Senior Museum Curator of Powysland Museum in Welshpool. Powysland Museum is one of the oldest collections in Wales. It dates from the end of the 19th century and was, up till about 20 years ago, housed in a purpose-built museum building in the town. Our most famous artefacts are probably the gold coin from Caersws, which comes from a Roman settlement at Caersws. Caersws is about 30 minutes away from here, and it had one of the biggest Roman settlements of its time, and this is the only gold coin that's found in this complex. From the social history gallery, I think my favourite object is a guillotine made out of mutton bones, made by French prisoners of war during the Napoleonic Wars. And the interesting story is that during the Napoleonic Wars, the area of Montgomeryshire was used to house French soldiers and French officers, obviously because it was very far from the sea and very far from France, so there wasn't very much chance of them escaping. But these French prisoners of war, they were not kept in prisons, they were actually kept in local houses or pubs, and they were allowed to walk freely. And there are lots of stories about them being very popular with the local girls, maybe not so popular with the local men. Some of them actually married local girls, some of them went back to France but came back and lived in the area. And the guillotine is just a wonderful piece of evidence of what these French soldiers probably have seen in towns in France. And the wonderful thing is that it has a body lying ready to have their head chopped off. There's a soldier standing next to it, and when you move that soldier forward, the blade of the guillotine comes down towards the neck of the guilty man. Funding for small museums is obviously a big issue because this is a local authority museum with very limited funding. So in order to do anything more than just exist, we have to go outside. For museums in Wales, the two main grant bodies will be Canal, which is museums, archives and libraries, which is a part of the Assembly government, and of course the Heritage Lottery Fund. With Canal, you mostly go for grants regarding small projects, projects which are about the collection, which are about care of collection, or indeed events and exhibitions. But with HLF, that's where you can go for the big grants. You can go for the very big grants to develop your museums, or, as I've done, use the Your Heritage, which is up to £50,000, to fund projects, temporary exhibitions, events and so forth. I've been involved in a number of Heritage Lottery funding projects. I think my favourite one, and the most recent one, is from 2008, where the museum did an exhibition on Queen Alexandra. Now, the reason for the interest in Queen Alexandra is the fact that I'm Danish, and so was she. She was also the longest reigning Princess of Wales ever, because Queen Victoria took such a long time in dying. And obviously then she became an incredibly popular Queen of England. Now, the funding for this project came from the Heritage Lottery Fund, and it came from Your Heritage. I started off with a pre-application form to the lottery, and that came back with some really good advice. And the main advice was, we will not fund an exhibition only. You will need to do other things that are related to the exhibition. So that formed my whole application. So when we put in the application, it was of course for the exhibition itself, and the exhibition was very, very ambitious. It included loans from the Royal Collections in Denmark, the Royal Archives in Denmark, the Royal Collections over here, the V&A, the National Portrait Gallery. So there was very big people to play with, or very big organisations to play with. So that was the exhibition. So that in itself was expensive, but then we added to that all these events that would make the exhibition more inclusive, which is what the Heritage Lottery Fund is very much about. They look at an exhibition and think that that is probably too stationary, so it doesn't it's something that people come to watch, but they don't get involved, and that's why they were asking for all these other events and activities. And we put on, during the exhibition period, an Victorian Edwardian fashion show. We put on some Victorian Edwardian dancing lessons. We were very lucky, we had a visit from Queen Victoria herself and her lady-in-waiting. Unfortunately, there are nobody who plays Queen Alexandra, so we had to do with mother-in-law. But mother-in-law was great. She was sitting outside holding court for schools and people who came passing by, and were telling the children about her daughter-in-law, about Alexandra. Then we had a number of lectures, one of them on photography, because Queen Alexandra and her husband Edward were both very, very keen amateur photographers, and indeed Alexandra herself had a book published with her private photographs. We had another lecture about family history, because of course with Queen Victoria and with Edward and Alexandra, they were related to almost every royal household in Europe, including Germany, which is interesting when you think of World War One. So it was quite obvious to have a lecture not just on that family, but also on how people could study their own family history. And so we had a number of really good activities that encouraged people to get involved and to make them feel part of Alexandra's life.